The morning started like any other in Ethan Carter's life, quiet, orderly, and predictable. The kind of morning he used to believe his future would always be. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of his parents' suburban home in New Jersey, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Outside, the neighborhood was calm, almost frozen in time. Inside, Ethan felt a strange unease he couldn't explain. He had come home for a few days to help with wedding preparations. His mother had already begun planning every detail, from guest lists to flower arrangements, as if the wedding was an unchangeable fact written into destiny. Ethan had smiled through it all, nodding when expected, playing the role of the devoted son and soon-to-be husband. He was engaged to Emily Ross. For 3 years, Emily had been the center of his world. Intelligent, charming, emotionally intense, she had a way of making Ethan feel chosen. 6 months ago, when he slipped the ring onto her finger, he believed he was sealing a future built on trust, loyalty, and shared dreams. She had promised him she was done with the past. Especially with Daniel. Daniel was her ex. The name itself carried a weight Ethan had learned to ignore. Emily had mentioned him early in their relationship. A long, complicated history, a love that burned too fast and too bright. But she had assured Ethan that chapter was closed. Completely over, she had said. I chose you. Ethan had believed her. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. Once. Then again. Ethan frowned slightly. He usually ignored his phone in the mornings, but something about the second vibration felt insistent. He picked it up and saw Emily's name glowing on the screen. A soft smile touched his lips at first. Then he opened the message. I'm meeting Daniel today. Just to talk. Don't overthink it. The smile vanished. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared at the screen, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less damaging. His heartbeat slowed, then skipped. A strange pressure built in his chest, tight and unfamiliar. Meeting him? Today. He read the message again. And again. The casual tone hurt more than the words themselves. There was no apology. No explanation. Just an assumption that he would understand, that he wouldn't question it, that he shouldn't overthink it. Ethan sat up in bed, running a hand through his hair. His mind raced through memories. Late-night conversations where Emily swore she hated her past, promises whispered in the dark, reassurances that Daniel meant nothing anymore. And yet, here he was. He typed a response, then deleted it. Typed again. Why now? 3 dots appeared almost immediately. He reached out. Said he needed closure. It's nothing, Ethan. Please trust me. Trust. The word echoed in his head like a cruel joke. Ethan leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling. Trust wasn't something you asked for after crossing a line. It was something you protected. He had never told Emily not to have a past. He had never tried to control her. But meeting an ex in secret? Informing him like it was an afterthought? That wasn't honesty. That was entitlement. His phone buzzed again. I didn't tell you earlier because I knew you'd react like this. That message cut deeper than the first. So she knew. She knew it would hurt him, and did it anyway. Ethan's chest tightened. The house felt too quiet now, the silence pressing in from all sides. Somewhere downstairs, he could hear his mother humming while arranging wedding invitations. Each sound felt distant, unreal, like noise from another life. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the American flag on his father's porch swayed gently in the breeze. Everything looked stable. Normal. Inside him, something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just about jealousy. It was about respect. Boundaries. The future he thought was secure suddenly felt fragile, built on ground that could collapse at any moment. He thought about the sacrifices he had made, moving cities for her job, adjusting his plans, defending her when his friends questioned her emotional closeness to the past. He had trusted her when she said love meant choosing the present over history. And now, history was calling her back. Ethan typed slowly this time. Where are you meeting him? The reply took longer. A cafe near his office. Please don't make this a big deal. A cafe. Public. Safe. But safety wasn't the point. Ethan closed his eyes. He felt anger rising, but beneath it was something worse, disappointment. The kind that doesn't explode, but sinks deep and stays there. This was the first time he truly wondered if Emily saw him as her future, or merely her option. He didn't reply. Minutes passed. Then another message arrived. I'll call you later. Later. After the conversation. After the memories. After whatever emotions resurfaced between two people who once loved each other. Ethan placed the phone face down and exhaled slowly. In that moment, he realized something he had been avoiding for months. He had been fighting alone to protect a relationship Emily was willing to risk. And if she could walk back into her past so easily, maybe his place in her future wasn't as secure as he believed. Downstairs, his mother called his name, asking him to come help choose wedding colors. Ethan hesitated. For the first time since the engagement, the word wedding didn't feel comforting. It felt like a question. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that this message, this single careless message, wasn't just about an ex. It was the beginning of an ending. Ethan didn't hear from Emily that evening. At first, he told himself it meant nothing. She had said she'd call later. Maybe she got caught up, maybe the conversation took longer than expected. But as the hours stretched on, each minute pressed heavier than the last. By 10 p.m., the house was quiet. His parents had gone to bed, tired from a day of wedding planning, unaware that the future they were so carefully arranging was already slipping out of alignment. Ethan sat alone in the living room, the television on mute, its flickering light casting shadows across his face. His phone lay beside him on the couch, screen dark, unmoving. He hated how often he glanced at it, hated how much power a silent device suddenly held over his emotions. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. He remembered the early days with Emily. How effortless everything had been. Long drives with the windows down, playlists they built together, late-night conversations where time dissolved. Back then, doubt had no place between them. If something bothered either of them, they talked. If something hurt, they fixed it. Silence had never been part of their language. Until now. At 11:47 p.m., his phone finally lit up. Emily calling. Ethan stared at the screen for a full 3 seconds before answering. He didn't rush. He didn't smile. He simply picked up. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Careful." "Hey," he replied. There was a pause. Not the comfortable kind. The kind filled with things neither person wanted to say. "So, I just got home," Emily continued. "Today was exhausting." Ethan waited. She didn't offer more. "How was it?" he asked finally. Another pause. "It was fine," she said. "We talked. Cleared some things up." Ethan leaned back into the couch, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "About what?" "About the past," Emily said quickly. "About why things ended the way they did. He needed closure, Ethan. That's all." "And you?" Ethan asked quietly. "What did you need?" The line went silent again. "I needed peace," she answered, though it sounded rehearsed. "I needed to know there were no loose ends." Ethan swallowed. "And do you feel at peace now?" "Yes," she said. "Too fast." "I do." He wanted to believe her. God, he really did. But something in her tone felt distant, as if she were speaking from behind a glass wall. "I wish you'd talked to me before meeting him," Ethan said. His voice was calm, but the effort it took surprised him. "Not after you'd already decided." "I knew you'd react badly," Emily replied, a defensive edge creeping in. "I didn't want to fight." "So you avoided one by creating a bigger problem?" he asked. "That's not fair," she snapped. "Isn't it?" Ethan countered. "Emily, we're engaged. You don't just meet your ex and tell me not to overthink it." She sighed. "You're making this more dramatic than it is." That sentence landed like a blow. Ethan closed his eyes. "If it wasn't a big deal," he said slowly, "you wouldn't have hidden it." Silence. When Emily spoke again, her voice had cooled. "I didn't hide it. I told you. After the decision was already made," Ethan replied. "That's not transparency. That's permission you didn't need." Another long pause. "I don't want to argue," Emily said. "Can we just move past this?" Move past this. Ethan felt something inside him retreat, a small, instinctive step backward. "I don't know how," he admitted. "You crossed a line, Emily. And you're acting like I should just pretend it didn't happen." "I said I was sorry," she replied. But she hadn't. Not really. The call ended soon after, unresolved. No shouting. No closure. Just two people saying goodnight like strangers who had once shared everything. That night, Ethan barely slept. Over the next few days, something subtle but unmistakable changed between them. Emily still texted. Still called. Still said I love you. But the warmth was gone. Conversations became shorter. Laughter felt forced. Where there used to be openness, there was now caution. Like both of them were afraid the wrong word might break something already fragile. Distance doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as normalcy. Emily began canceling calls, blaming work. When Ethan suggested visiting her that weekend, she hesitated before agreeing. When he asked how she was feeling about the wedding, she gave vague answers. Excited, she'd say. Just stressed. Ethan noticed everything. He noticed how she no longer shared small details of her day. How her replies took longer. How she avoided talking about Daniel, but also avoided reassuring him. The doubt crept in slowly. Had meeting her ex awakened something? Or worse, had it shown her what she'd lost? Ethan tried to talk to her again, calmly this time. He told her he needed reassurance, not dismissal. That trust, once shaken, needed care. Emily listened, but only halfway. You're overthinking again, she said. I chose you. Isn't that enough? Ethan wanted to scream that choosing someone once wasn't the same as choosing them every day. But he didn't. Instead, he grew quiet. And Emily mistook his silence for acceptance. At home, his parents continued wedding preparations with growing excitement. His mother showed him venue photos. His father talked about guest lists and budgets. Everyone seemed so sure. Ethan wasn't. One evening, he sat alone on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. His phone buzzed. Emily again. Busy tonight. Talk tomorrow? He stared at the message for a long time before replying. Sure. He realized then how dangerous silence could be. Not the absence of words, but the absence of effort. Love shouldn't feel like you're constantly proving your worth. It shouldn't require you to suppress your fears just to keep the peace. And yet, that's exactly what he was doing. Somewhere between unanswered calls and half-hearted reassurances, Ethan felt the foundation of his relationship shifting. Not collapsing, but eroding. Slowly. Quietly. He didn't know it yet, but this distance, the unspoken resentment, the unresolved doubt, was preparing him for a choice he never imagined making. One that would change everything. The first promise Emily broke wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no confession, no obvious betrayal. It was something smaller, something easier to dismiss. And that's what made it dangerous. It started with a lie by omission. Ethan noticed it on a Tuesday night, after a long day at work. He had called Emily during his drive home, expecting their usual routine. Complaints about traffic, jokes about dinner plans, familiar comfort. Instead, the call went unanswered. He didn't think much of it at first. 10 minutes later, his phone buzzed. In a meeting. Call you later. Ethan frowned. Emily rarely had late meetings. Still, he replied. Okay. An hour passed. Then 2. At 9:30 p.m., he saw it. Emily had posted a photo on her private Instagram story. A dimly lit restaurant table, 2 wine glasses, soft jazz playing in the background. No faces. No tags. But Ethan recognized the place. It was the same cafe she had mentioned the day she met Daniel. His stomach tightened. He didn't confront her immediately. Part of him still wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe she was there with coworkers. Maybe the story wasn't current. But when she finally called him close to midnight, her voice gave her away. Too relaxed. Too light. Sorry, today got crazy, she said. How was your evening? Ethan didn't answer right away. Where are you? There was a brief hesitation, just a fraction of a second. At home, Emily replied. That was the moment something inside Ethan cracked. It wasn't the cafe. It wasn't Daniel. It was the lie. He had always believed that honesty was the one rule they never broke. Even when things were uncomfortable. Even when the truth hurt. Especially then. You sure? Ethan asked quietly. Yes, she said. Too quickly again. Why? Ethan exhaled slowly. Emily, I saw your story. Silence. The line stayed open, but she didn't speak. Why didn't you tell me? He continued. Why lie? I didn't lie, she said defensively. I just didn't think it mattered. You said you were in a meeting, Ethan replied. His voice remained steady, but it took effort. Then you said you were home. I didn't want another argument, she snapped. You've been on edge lately. On edge. As if this was his fault. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, closing his eyes. Do you hear yourself? He asked. You're lying to avoid accountability. It was just dinner, Emily said. You're blowing this out of proportion. Who were you with? Ethan asked. Another pause. A friend. The word hung there, vague and hollow. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Which friend? Emily sighed sharply. Why does it matter? Because you promised. Because you told me there were no more secrets. Because you said I was your future. But Ethan didn't say any of that. Instead, he asked the question he already knew the answer to. Was it Daniel? The silence confirmed it. Yes, she admitted finally. But it wasn't like that. Ethan laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because it hurt too much not to. You promised me, he said. You promised there was nothing left there. I didn't plan this, Emily insisted. He reached out again. He said he was struggling. I didn't want to be cruel. So you chose to be dishonest instead, Ethan replied. That's not fair. No, Ethan said, his voice dropping. What's not fair is asking me to trust you while you keep breaking that trust. The argument escalated after that. Words piled on top of words. Old issues resurfaced. Emily accused Ethan of insecurity. Ethan accused Emily of emotional negligence. Neither of them won. After that night, the promises didn't shatter all at once. They unraveled. Emily promised she wouldn't see Daniel again. A week later, Ethan found out she had. Emily promised she would be more transparent. But her phone was always face down now. Emily promised the wedding still mattered to her. Yet she stopped talking about it entirely. Ethan began to feel like he was holding on to something that no longer wanted to be held. He noticed the changes in himself too. He stopped asking questions, not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid of the answers. He stopped sharing his doubts, because every concern turned into an argument. He started measuring his words, censoring his emotions, shrinking to fit into a relationship that no longer felt safe. That wasn't love. That was survival. One evening, Ethan visited Emily unannounced. He hadn't planned to. His body simply moved before his mind could stop it. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face. You didn't tell me you were coming, she said. I wanted to see you, Ethan replied. Her apartment felt different now. Colder. Less familiar. His eyes drifted to the coffee table, and there it was. A men's watch. Not his. Emily noticed his gaze and quickly picked it up. That's Daniel's, she said. He forgot it. Forgot it. In her apartment. Ethan felt the last thread of denial snap. So this is where we are, he said quietly. Don't start, Emily warned. I'm not starting anything, Ethan replied. I'm ending the pretending. She crossed her arms. You're being dramatic again. No, he said. I'm finally being honest with myself. Emily didn't respond. And in that silence, Ethan understood something painful but clear. She wasn't fighting for him anymore. That night, he drove home with his hands tight on the steering wheel, heart pounding, not with anger, but with clarity. Love without trust was just attachment. Promises without action were just words. And a future built on broken vows would eventually collapse. As he pulled into his parents' driveway, the house lights glowing warmly ahead, Ethan realized the truth he had been avoiding since that first message. The relationship wasn't breaking. It was already broken. And soon he would have to decide what to do with the pieces. Ethan hadn't planned to tell his family anything. Not about Emily. Not about Daniel. Not about the slow collapse of the relationship everyone believed was perfect. Some truths felt too heavy to explain, especially when the people around you were so certain about the ending. His parents spoke about the wedding as if it were already a memory, something fixed and untouchable. And for a while, Ethan let them believe that illusion. Until one evening changed everything. It was a Sunday dinner, the kind his family treated as sacred. The table was full, warm with laughter and familiar voices. His mother had cooked too much food, as always. His father poured drinks and talked about work. Everything looked normal. Ethan felt like an outsider in his own life. Halfway through the meal, his mother cleared her throat. The sound alone made Ethan look up. We met the Harrisons today, she said casually, serving herself more rice. Ethan froze. The Harrisons? His father nodded. Old family friends. We've known them for years. His mother smiled, the kind of smile that carried intention. They asked about you. Ethan felt his chest tighten. About me, how? They have a daughter, she continued gently. Her name is Claire. She just moved back from Chicago. MBA, works in finance. Very grounded girl. Ethan put his fork down. He already knew where this was going. We told them you're engaged, his father added quickly. This isn't what you think. But it was exactly what he thought. His mother hesitated, then said the words that would change the direction of his life. If things ever changed, she said carefully, this would be a very good match. The room fell quiet. Ethan stared at his plate. Part of him wanted to shut the conversation down immediately, to defend a relationship he no longer trusted. Another part, quieter, more honest, felt a strange sense of relief. An exit. Not a betrayal. Not a fight. An escape. I'm already engaged, Ethan said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. His mother studied him closely. Are you happy? The question landed harder than he expected. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. No one had asked him that in weeks. He exhaled. I don't know. His father leaned back in his chair. Son, he said gently, engagements don't fall apart overnight. But they don't fall apart for no reason either. Ethan said nothing. His mother reached across the table and placed her hand over his. We're not asking you to decide anything today, she said softly. We're just saying you have options. Options. Ethan had forgotten what that felt like. That night, lying in his childhood bedroom, he stared at the ceiling long after midnight. Emily hadn't called. She hadn't texted. And for the first time, the silence didn't hurt. Instead, it felt peaceful. He thought about Claire Harris. He didn't know her face, didn't know her voice, but he knew what she represented, a future untouched by lies, by exes, by constant doubt. A relationship that wouldn't require him to compete with someone else's past. The next morning, Emily finally messaged him. We need to talk. Ethan read the words without emotion. About what? He replied. Several minutes passed. About us. Things feel different. Different. He almost smiled. Later that day, his mother knocked on his door. The Harrisons invited us for tea next weekend, she said. No pressure. Just a meeting. Ethan didn't answer right away. In his mind, he pictured Emily, always distracted, always defensive, always pulling away. Then he pictured a blank page. A reset. A life that didn't feel like constant emotional negotiation. Okay, he said quietly. His mother's eyes widened, not with triumph but concern. Are you sure? Ethan nodded. I need clarity. That evening, he met Emily in person for the first time in days. The distance between them was immediate. She talked. He listened. She explained. He observed. When she finished, she reached for his hand. I don't want to lose you, she said. Ethan looked at her and realized something terrifying. He didn't know if he believed her anymore. I need space, he said. Her expression hardened. Is this because of your family? No, he replied. This is because of us. That night, as Ethan drove home, he understood the truth. The proposal from his family wasn't an attack on his love life. It was a lifeline, an unexpected escape from a future built on broken trust. And for the first time since that message weeks ago, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a different ending. One where he wasn't fighting to be chosen. One where peace came before passion. And soon, very soon, he would have to choose which path to take. The day Ethan decided to let Emily go didn't begin with anger. It began with clarity. A quiet, steady understanding that settled in his chest the moment he woke up. There was no panic, no rush to check his phone, no ache of anticipation. For the first time in weeks, his thoughts were calm. Heavy but calm. That alone told him everything he needed to know. He didn't love Emily less. He just loved himself more than the pain of holding on. Emily had asked to meet. A park downtown, neutral ground, public, safe, detached. The kind of place people chose when they already knew something was ending. Ethan arrived early. He sat on a bench beneath a large oak tree, watching strangers pass by, joggers, couples, parents with children. Ordinary lives moving forward. He wondered how many of them were quietly carrying endings of their own. Emily arrived 10 minutes late. She looked the same, beautiful, composed, familiar. But the way she hesitated before approaching him felt different. Like she already sensed what was coming. Hey, she said softly. Hey. They sat side by side, leaving a small but noticeable space between them. Once, they would have closed that gap without thinking. Now it felt deliberate. Emily spoke first. She always did when she was nervous. I've been thinking a lot, she said. About us. About everything. Ethan nodded. He didn't interrupt. I know things haven't been great, she continued. But I don't want to throw away what we have. 3 years doesn't just disappear. He looked at her then, not with longing, not with anger, but with honesty. I agree, he said. It doesn't disappear. But it also doesn't excuse what's happening now. She frowned. I told you, Daniel is not a threat. Ethan smiled sadly. That's not the point anymore. She turned toward him. Then what is? Ethan took a breath. I don't feel chosen. The words hung between them. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. I feel like I'm constantly asking for reassurance, he continued. Like I have to compete with your past. And every time I express that, you tell me I'm overthinking. I never meant to make you feel that way, she said quickly. But you did, Ethan replied gently. And when I told you, you didn't change anything." Emily's voice sharpened. "So you're just giving up?" Ethan shook his head. "No. I held on longer than I should have." Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you." He believed her. That was the tragedy of it. "I know," he said softly. "But love isn't enough when trust is gone." She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold on either. "I can cut him off," she said. "Completely. I swear." Ethan closed his eyes. He had waited weeks to hear those words. And now that they'd arrived, they felt empty. "I shouldn't have had to ask," he said. "And you shouldn't be offering it now because you're afraid of losing me." Emily's tears fell freely now. "Please don't do this." Ethan felt the familiar ache rise in his chest, but he didn't let it control him. "I don't want to become someone who's always afraid," he said. "Afraid of who you're texting. Afraid of being replaced. Afraid of being called insecure for wanting basic respect." She shook her head. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," he admitted. "But it's one I can live with." Silence wrapped around them. Finally, Emily whispered, "So that's it?" Ethan nodded. "I'm letting you go." The words felt final. Clean. Painful, but clean. She stood abruptly, turning away to wipe her face. When she looked back at him, something in her expression had changed. Not anger. Not sadness. Regret. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said. "I hope you do too," Ethan replied. She walked away without looking back. Ethan stayed on the bench long after she was gone. His chest hurt, but beneath the pain was something unexpected. Relief. He had loved her deeply. He would probably always care. But he had chosen peace over chaos, dignity over attachment, truth over comfort. When he finally stood, the world felt different. Lighter. Uncertain but honest. That evening, he returned home to a quiet house. His parents didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. Later, lying in bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling and allowed himself to grieve. Not just the relationship, but the future he had imagined. Then he let it go. Because some endings aren't failures. They're acts of self-respect. And as sleep finally claimed him, Ethan knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the moment it truly began. The months after Ethan let Emily go were quieter than he expected. There were no dramatic confrontations. No late-night breakdowns. Just a steady, unfamiliar calm, like the silence after a storm finally passes. Life didn't rush to replace what he'd lost. Instead, it gave him space. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan learned how to breathe again. He focused on work, on family, on rebuilding the parts of himself he had neglected while trying to hold a fragile relationship together. Some days were harder than others. Memories still surfaced at inconvenient moments, a song, a cafe, a familiar laugh. But the memories no longer controlled him. They simply reminded him of how far he had come. One evening, his mother asked him gently, "Are you ready to meet Claire?" Ethan paused before answering. "I think so," he said. They met at a small, elegant restaurant, not romantic, not tense. Just two people sitting across from each other, curious rather than guarded. Claire Harris was nothing like the version Ethan had imagined. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't probing for his past. She listened. That alone felt extraordinary. Claire spoke with calm confidence, her words measured but sincere. She didn't rush silence. She didn't fill it with assumptions. When Ethan mentioned his broken engagement, she didn't flinch. "I'm not here to replace anyone," she said simply. "I'm here to see if something new can exist." Something about that honesty settled him. Their meetings continued, slowly, intentionally. No emotional pressure. No comparisons. No ghosts from the past waiting to interrupt. What grew between them wasn't intense or dramatic. It was steady. When Claire agreed to the marriage, it wasn't out of desperation or family obligation. It was a decision made with clarity. And when Ethan said yes, it felt like a choice, not an escape anymore, but a direction. The wedding was smaller than originally planned. Simpler. More intimate. There were no grand speeches about destiny or forever. Just quiet vows spoken with intention. As Ethan stood beside Claire, watching her smile, calm, present, unafraid, he realized something profound. This was what safety felt like. Not passion that burned unpredictably. Not love that demanded constant reassurance. But partnership. After the ceremony, as guests laughed and music played softly in the background, Ethan stepped outside for a moment alone. The evening air was cool, grounding. He checked his phone, out of habit more than expectation. There was a missed message from Emily. He stared at it for a long second. Then he turned the phone off. Some doors didn't need to be reopened to be understood. Claire joined him outside, slipping her hand into his. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need explanations. "Ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded. As they walked back inside together, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not excitement fueled by uncertainty, not love mixed with fear. Peace. This marriage wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a replacement. It was a beginning built on lessons learned the hard way. Ethan knew life would still bring challenges. No relationship was immune to struggle. But this time, he wasn't starting from broken promises or lingering shadows. He was starting from truth. And as the night continued, surrounded by family, laughter, and a future that finally felt aligned with who he had become, Ethan understood the final truth of his journey. Letting go wasn't losing. It was making room. For something healthier. For something honest. For something real. The end wasn't where his story finished. It was where it finally began.